My neighbor wanted my backyard so he could build a guest house. When I refused, he broke in and burned down my garden shed to send a message. I lost everything. I worked with investigators, and when they found arson tools in his garage, he was slammed with felony arson charges. When the judge handed him a 10-year prison sentence, he finally looked at me and I just turned and walked away. I've lived in the same modest home for over 15 years. My backyard has always been my escape. I built a small wooden shed by hand, kept my tools there, and spent weekends tending my tomatoes, roses, and apple trees. I never thought it would cause me trouble. That changed the day Mark moved in next door. Mark was flashy. Loud pickup, expensive watches, always talking big. The first time we met, he smiled wide and said, "Hey neighbor, I've got plans for this place. Gonna build a big guest house out back for my family and maybe for Airbnb." I nodded, said, "Good for you," and went back to trimming my hedges. I didn't know then how important my backyard would become to him. 2 weeks later, Mark came over again, this time serious. "Listen, I need a bit more land to make the guest house work. You've got space to spare. How about I buy a strip of your yard, just enough for my plans?" I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. "Sorry, Mark. I like my yard the way it is. I'm not selling." The smile vanished. His voice changed. "Think about it. Could be good money for you." "I'm not interested," I repeated. From that moment, everything shifted. Mark started nitpicking everything I did. If I mowed the lawn, he'd shout over the fence, "You missed a spot!" If my sprinkler sprayed a tiny bit onto his grass, he'd send angry texts. Once, I caught him standing in my yard measuring distances with a tape measure. When I confronted him, he muttered, "Just seeing what you're wasting." I tried to brush it off, but my gut told me worse was coming. Then came the threats. One afternoon as I watered my roses, Mark leaned over the fence and said coldly, "You know, things happen. Wood rots. Accidents occur. Sheds catch fire." I froze. Was that supposed to be funny? He just smiled and walked away. I told my friend Rick about it. Rick lives 2 streets over and used to be a cop. He told me, "Document everything. Texts, videos, take photos. Just in case." So I did. A month later, on a cold November night, I woke up coughing. The air smelled like burning plastic. I ran outside in my slippers and saw flames tearing through my shed. The heat was so intense I had to shield my face. I screamed for help as the fire lit up the sky. Neighbors rushed out. Someone called 911. I stood there helpless, watching my tools, garden supplies, and years of work turn to ash. The next morning, after the fire was out, the fire marshal told me flatly, "It wasn't electrical. This was set on purpose." I knew who had done it. But knowing and proving are 2 different things. I gave the cops everything, photos, recordings, even the voicemail where Mark had said, "Accidents happen." My neighbor 2 houses down, Mrs. Alvarez, had a Ring camera. We checked the footage. There he was. 2:13 a.m. Mark, wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap, sneaking into my backyard with a red gas can. The detectives got a search warrant. They raided his garage and found the gas can, charred rags, matches, and gloves. When they cuffed him on his front lawn, I watched from my driveway. His wife stood frozen on their porch, crying. I didn't feel sorry. At the station, Mark claimed it wasn't him. Said I was framing him. Said I was bitter over a simple land deal gone wrong. His arrogance was unreal. The trial hasn't started yet. He's out on bond, but the DA told me with the evidence, it's going to stick. I still can't believe it came to this. All because I wouldn't sell a strip of grass. A lot has happened since my last post. I promised I would update, so here it is. The police evidence was rock solid, but Mark wasn't going down quietly. First, he tried to intimidate me. A week after his arrest, I found tire tracks across my front yard. My mailbox was smashed flat. I didn't see who did it, but I had my suspicions. I called the police, and they added it to the list of incidents. Then, the letters started. Anonymous envelopes stuffed into my mailbox. Drop the charges or you'll regret it. You're ruining an innocent man's life. This isn't over. The sheriff assigned a cruiser to patrol my street more often. Rick, my friend, lent me one of his old security cameras and helped me install it. My nerves were shot. I barely slept. I was tired of living like a prisoner in my own home. The trial date came in early spring. I sat stiff in the courtroom as Mark swaggered in like he owned the place, wearing a tailored suit and fake confidence. His lawyer argued that I was trying to sabotage his property value, that I had set the fire myself for insurance. The whole thing made me sick. I had no insurance claim. The shed was old and underinsured. I lost everything. The DA shut down the lies fast. The turning point came when Mrs. Alvarez took the stand. She's 73 and walks with a cane, but her voice was steady as a rock. I saw him walk through his yard and climb the fence with a red can, she said calmly. I knew what he was doing. I was too scared to go outside. The jury watched the footage. It was blurry, but the timestamp matched. His height, his walk, his own backyard light turning off as he left. Mark's face went white for the first time. Then came the evidence from the search. Gas can with traces matching the accelerant, his fingerprints on the gloves, charred rags in his trash bin. His wife, who had stood by him through the whole ordeal, left the courtroom crying that day. She never came back. Mark tried one last dirty trick. His lawyer approached my attorney offering me money under the table to settle things privately and drop the charges. I refused. I told my lawyer, let him rot. The jury went to deliberate. 12 hours passed. I didn't eat. I barely drank water. I stared at the clock in that waiting room, thinking about every damn tool, every photo album, every memory that burned. When the door finally opened, the foreman stood up and said the words I had waited for. Guilty of felony arson. Mark stood frozen. I stared straight at him. For once, he didn't smirk. The judge hasn't sentenced him yet. That comes next week. I'll post the final update after that. The sentencing hearing was today. I finally have closure. I barely slept last night. I kept replaying the whole nightmare in my head, the threats, the fire, the court dates, the fear. My hands were shaking as I walked into the Ada County Courthouse this morning. I didn't even notice Mark sitting at the defendant's table until I was right behind him. He looked bad. Gone was the cocky neighbor who thought he ran the block. He looked smaller, pale, like the weight of what he'd done had finally crushed him. His expensive lawyer sat stone-faced next to him. The courtroom was full. Neighbors who had followed the case came to see it through. Even Mrs. Alvarez was there, holding Rick's arm for balance. I gave her a soft nod. I was glad she came. The judge, an older woman with no time for nonsense, gave Mark one last chance to speak. Mark stood up slowly. His voice cracked as he spoke. I lost everything. My wife left. My business collapsed. I have no excuses. I thought I could scare him into selling. I was angry. I made a stupid choice. I'm sorry. I stared at him. Sorry? Now he was sorry? After months of stalking, vandalism, arson, and legal games? The judge didn't buy it either. She read through the charges like she was reading a grocery list. Felony arson. Attempted intimidation of a witness. Destruction of private property. Then came the words I had waited almost a year to hear. 10 years in the Idaho State Correctional Institution. The courtroom went dead silent. Mark turned to look at me for the first time since the trial began. I don't know what he expected. A nod? A handshake? Forgiveness? I just stared back. Then I stood, turned my back on him, and walked out. Outside, the sun was shining. It felt brighter than it had in months. Rick clapped me on the shoulder. You did it, he said. I nodded. No, we did. It's over now. The shed is gone. I haven't decided if I'll rebuild it. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. For the first time in a long time, I feel safe in my own backyard. And if any future neighbor ever gets the same wild idea, they'll know better. I hope nobody else ever has to go through what I did. But if you do, stand your ground. Document everything. Don't back down. Justice is worth it.